call us to order. We're still waiting for Dean Gates, but I'll put this on the record. It's currently 11:25. We were noticed for 11 to noon. I'm going to run this from 11:25 until at least 12:30. We had a scheduling issue, and our main presenter, our only presenter, is currently returning from the permit center, and that's caused a delay. But we're going to stick to this agenda. We're going to talk about the revised draft to the new taxi ordinance. Hopefully everyone received it yesterday. That's a stakeholder on the list. If you're not on the list, please see me after, and we'll get you your email. Will get you on the list. This is still a draft in draft form. I haven't actually introduced this to the assembly yet. So if there is something in here that particularly concerns you, let me know, and we will talk about whether it needs to go forward. There should be 3 documents you can pick up in the back there. One is the PowerPoint that we're going to go through with Dean. The other is an Excel sheet of all the different changes to this version, and then of course the ordinance itself. Hey, Dean. Great. Yeah, there, wherever you prefer. Okay. Do we have someone to... The PowerPoint's right here. Carissa, could you change when he says? So just, Dean, just tell Carissa and she'll move it forward as needed. Okay? All right. So let's go around and identify ourselves to the record. Start with Eric.
Eric Musser, Transportation Inspector.
Fred Doyle.
Forrest Dunbar.
Tim Steele. John Weddleton.
Steve Peterson.
Susanna Prince.
So in the interest of time, we're not going to go through the audience. For those in the audience, if you guys want to come forward, if you can't hear us, the acoustics in this room are different from the 8th floor. It's also this. If you, I want to have time at the end for people to speak, but you have to speak pretty loudly for this recorder up here to catch you. Okay. So Dean, could you start the presentation, please?
Oh, sure. I apologize for the help from the meeting. So just to get started, I put together a PowerPoint. This is how PowerPoint image from the administration's presentations. This is what I made one for today. And let's go to our next slide. We're going to discuss just the changes from the December 6th draft to the recent draft that we distributed. There's a number of them, and then I'll summarize in kind of bullet point fashion the substantive changes overall for the ordinance and common code. So our next slide shows a list of specific changes from the December 6th draft. Some of them are very minimal. For example, I'm going to do one that just says the revisers to re-enter the definitions section. The one was on page 4 and 5. We're removing the mileage metric for annual and biannual inspections. And we used to have 10,000, an inspection required every 10,000 miles. And if the vehicle has over 200,000 miles, then you require an inspection every 12,000 miles or 4 times annually. So we took out those mileage, so it's only annually, and if it's over 200,000 miles, it will be twice a year, maybe more. That's the transportation inspectors. So the next change is I added a few sections here. The next 3 are new sections in the ordinance as we do changes to those code sections. So one is about the video surveillance recording. And there have been some conflicts over obtaining access to recordings, and so we have some language here that was recommended to allow these here. And this would simply allow a transportation inspector or a peace officer to, if they need to, for enforcement of Title 11 or law enforcement purposes, access the video surveillance recording data medium, I guess it's a chip with the data, and take it from the cab right there. And at the same time, we have to read as soon as possible in the form the cab owner, the permit owner, that they have taken that recording data because people, taxi cabs just have that video surveillance at all times, right, 72 continuous hours. So if you take the data immediately, it needs to be replaced. So the notice to the owners that is required if the TI or law enforcement use the data. So our next one, and I guess assuming family members want to ask questions, we will in time. So our next one is virtual testing program. This was a training for the sensitivity, geography, different stuff, and that section's been removed. This is just to get a more people in the transportation services in Alaska. That basically makes obtaining the chauffeur's license well, it reduces the burden to obtain one. The next change for accessible tax cab fleet permits. There have been some difficulties getting interest in people obtaining the accessible tax cab permits and the fleet permits. So to make that more attractive, there's removal of the 5 tax cab minimum was an accessible fleet in 1126. You have to have 20 accessible cabs to operate a fleet under the fleet permit, try a whole bunch of other lesson burdens for the permit. But then for individual accessible tax cabs, we also removed the required hours of operation. There were some hours required data to code in the past couple of years. Monday to Friday, I think it was 8 or 5 p.m. So that requirement's been removed, so it's up to the permit owners. This question as to when to operate the accessible tax cab. Let's see, I'll try to go through this a little quicker. So, explains minor language edit. Again, hours for the disability accessible cabs being removed. Next one. The signage alarm had a big paragraph of language describing what signage electronic alarm is supposed to do. And we just decided to simplify it. Signage electric alarm is required, and the TI can verify that it's operable. So it leaves it open really to whatever's on the market. Then we removed the commission-approved metering app list that was in the draft amendments from December, and just back away from that. We added requirement that the metering application is used. This is a taximeter that's software-based using location services and GPS to track the distance and time of their cabs in operation. So this will turn them digital dispatch application. But this change, it added language saying that system has to ensure that it cannot be reset or controlled manually from within the cab, so that it's an anti-tampering requirement language for whatever device that is installed. The next was the leading language quality trip sheet. As you see, we're removing the trip sheet requirements instead of handwriting on a piece of paper in the cab. This latest draft makes the trip sheet so that the same information we put on the trip sheet will be entered on the computer in cab or on the app that's used the digital dispatch system. Next, we have taken out the requirement to demonstrate the ability to read, write, and speak English, but we're putting that back here, and it seems like a good requirement. So for a chauffeur's license, we don't have that training, extensive training for all these other things. We do have an English proficiency requirements. That would be the only exam that would be administered to get chauffeur's license. If we could go to the next thing, please. So in this draft, we also have added without good cause. There were comments in the industry that when you drive a disability accessible cab, it's the code currently, and this is an amendment from a few years ago, say that driver declines request for specifically a wheelchair accessible cab, and the driver of a wheelchair accessible cab declines that request, they would be barred from the dispatch service as forwarded. for the dispatches for the next 24 hours. But I guess there's some circumstances where there's significant cause to decline, so we have this language to put on for that. So not just arbitrarily, but good cause only. Again, there's at its preliminary trip sheet, we had language earlier about a dispatch service, its location, that it must be residents and domiciled in the U.S. and have its operations center in the U.S. and have a business office within the municipality. This is a little change, so it's just resident of the U.S. and domiciled in the U.S. somewhere, and has to have a business location in the municipality with regular office hours. So it doesn't say anything else about what other functions of dispatch service operations are located. Let's see. Then next one for 114053A, just a clarifying sentence to distinguish a computerized GPS-based electronic dispatch system from a digital dispatch app. We said comments, there's confusion. What's the difference? They sound the same in this language. So the difference is basically a computerized GPS-based system is communication, electronic computerized communication from the dispatch center and the taxi cab. Nothing about the customer requesting, a ride, the app, or the computer, the internet, and that's a digital dispatch app. That's a supplemental app where you can interface with customers over the internet and then that's the difference between the two. I think it's clarifies that. We distinguished in the next one, 114068, call-out services for passenger transportation and trip guide records. This is basically, I guess, some taxi cab service out there. Lockout service. I used it myself. I like to see that car, and they call it cab for that. That's not a trip. That's not data that the TMI needs. They were interested in fares and trip data, so there's a line about different call outs, but this is not a trip. And we added children, yes, to add the reference to motor fuel taxes being included in the average fuel price when we not fuel surcharge. We also are approving the decision certificate required within the regulations. And then at the end of the draft ordinance, there's a new section 7 that tells the Transportation Commission to look at the regulations. There's a number of them, and anything else that they need. That needs to be done to implement changes in this ordinance. Some of this go pretty far, so the Transportation Commission can take a detailed look and make a report within 20 days after this ordinance is passed as to whether to read or they've already drafted regulations. So that's the difference between our December 6th draft and the draft you have today. Do you have any questions about those changes before I move on?
Any changes? Questions from the committee?
I think I'd have a few for
Eric?
Eric, but I don't, so maybe I'll.
Okay. And we're going to talk about also, for those who maybe weren't here or just need a refresher, that was the differences between this draft and the December 6th draft. The December 6th draft also has very large changes to the law, and we're going to go through some of those right now. Correct?
Well, that's what I just discussed. But
Yep.
the next, I'll go into basically the changes to current code and the current draft.
Okay.
So, basically, the changes here all the aspects of tax cab service in municipality and the other things, schemes and vehicles for hire as well. So, the rate caps, employers, bidders, permits, tax cabs, chauffeur requirements, dispatch service. And goals basically, reduce some of the burdens on the industry overall, simply on the tax industry. Also competition, there's new technology out there that our current code language doesn't really accommodate, so we're making changes for that and make it more level playing field with TNCs and Uber, Lyft, and the other transportation services out there. And also it reduces some of the municipal mandates on these services and instead leaves how we're going to operate our service as a business decision from owners, dispatch service owners. And so the next slide I've kind of categorized these. I want to start out with the good news. The good news is this draft reduces any permit fees and removes that was back to what they were in, I believe, 2013. 1,425. We'll reduce some of the costs, especially for operators and how they operate multiple points. So our next one, those changes are at the end of this document and the regulations.
Okay. What's up, Dean?
Well, we could go on.
Actually,
Yeah, go ahead. John?
okay,
Any question?
maybe you're going on with this, but so the fees were lowered, is that based on your actual cost?
That's with the will of the chair. The fee reduction would result in some staff changes in the division.
So to speak to that, John, I wanted to lower the fees to help the industry compete, but this ordinance also, I hope, lowers because it, for example, reduces the number of inspections, lowers the workload for the TI. So that's sort of how I tried to balance it. Reducing the amount of work that goes through his office and reducing the funds that go through his office.
Just, your office is intended to be self-supporting based on the fees, so.
It's correct. The entire program is designed to be self-supported by those ways.
Right, thanks.
How many people do you have?
Tim, what?
Sorry.
No, thank you. Mr. Steele.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Oh, you just asked how many people worked in his office. He said 4. Mr. Gates, could you continue, please?
And Chairman, look anytime if you want to elaborate on some of the reasons these changes are.
Okay.
So our next category is the rate caps, floors, and this is mostly in the draft ordinance. Each for 11, 10, 15, the rates that are it allows the commission to promulgate regulations setting the maximum and minimum for tax cap fares. So that's being removed. This gets the municipality out of price fixing. There's one exception there is a curbside hail fare. And the reason is if a person, a passenger, potential customer is curbside and is hailing a cab, hand with, they don't have the opportunity to shop around, right, for what rates are best. If you have competitive rates out there, if we're at the curb, the first cab you see, or if you have the line at the airport, the cab in front of the line, somebody take, it's a curbside hail. So the rate caps, we raise $3 for the black drop, and I think it's 30 cents for traditional mile. That will only apply to a curbside hail. So any other fares through an app, telephone call, dispatch, stuff like that, this removes the maximum rate, the $3 rate for black drop. And the dispatch services can set the rate that they're subscribing taxi cab permittees we use. So this also removes the minimum rate for limousine services. So I haven't heard from the limousine at this time, but basically the commission are fixing prices with a few exceptions. The commission we had, I guess, deleted the maximum lease rate in 2013. And the commission hasn't set any since then, but we're removing their authority or ability to do so with this change as well. The commission for vehicle for hire applications, that's if it's not a taxi cab, then vehicle for hire, you need to submit their rates, they propose, and describe their service and so forth. And this says the commission doesn't need to approve the rates, but a method for reviewing the vehicle for hire application. Go on, please. And so the changes that impact fares here, a few others that I mentioned. One is allowing dynamic pricing, so like surge pricing, like for the past years. We have an amendment that allows up to a 20% higher fare with market demand, peaks, or times of high market demand.
Yes.
Just connecting those two, so you have a maximum for curbside service, would that, can that go 20% higher
That's an interesting question.
based on the dynamic, right?
Good question.
I don't think the language we currently have in here restricts it, and so that could apply the way it's read. So it's at the bottom, page 3. I don't see linking it or not allowing that to be like the curbside health. So that would be a policy call whether dynamic pricing should be able to do that as well.
It's a good point because they could, for example, say, well, it's always surge pricing at the airport, for example, or what have you. Yeah, interesting. Something to think about. Yep. Go ahead.
Next, we have dispatch services that there's that's not really different from currently dispatch services. So that their subscribers charge irrigation was to change. But what is different is around maximum. So is dispatch services may push to 250 flag drop, 250 flag drop. And then what else is new is allowing prepaid fares. I'm not exactly sure how that would work. The industry asked for that kind of feature to be allowed, and we have language that does allow it. It would require that that fares prepaid, that the actual fare isn't exaggerated here, it's the actual fare. Any excesses refunded or returned to the customer as a credit for future prepaid run. So simply just to be full. And so our next slide, these changes, substantial changes that affect permit operations.
Sorry, Dean. John?
On page 4F, I think we removed it beyond.
Yes.
It says, no person may require payment of taxi cab rates greater than those implemented by the commission. Did we take the commission out of all fare say?
Yes, pretty much. So,
Should that be deleted to reference to the commission?
yes, this draft ordinance, while we strive for perfection, it's not quite there. So I appreciate you pointing that out. We do have the issue language or established by the dispatch service company, so if that alternative. I'll look at that. It looks like it should be removed. Thank you, Mr. Wilton. So substantive effects on permits generally. We're allowing the idling of permits. So it's not simply the vehicle, but the permit. The permit cannot weigh the vehicle, it's a vehicle, right? But if times of low demand, the winter months, I suppose, some permittees may want to idle their permit, and so it's not in use. And we're doing this month-to-month basis with some prior notice to the dispatch service company. To be there, they can expect their monthly subscriber fee and all. They have some advance notice, and they will see that it's not more than 21 days, not less than 5 days for that next calendar month that the dispatch service is notified that the permit is going to be idled that following month. And this, we also have language that requires the contract with the dispatch service company to allow for idling, so the dispatch service company can't do it. That's got to be allowed for permittees to do that. We also have some language that will suspend fees for insurance coverage premiums. I am not quite sure what the insurance industry would think about, but we have language there that, as I understand it, some insurance products for some transportation service companies, we have that kind of feature. So next, there's no permit lapse for non-use. There was language earlier that said when permits issued, it has to be put in service within 45 days. And in a 12-month period, if it's not in service for 90 days cumulatively, then permit lapses. Permit leases permit, and this just to stop. So if we're going to idle it a month here and a month there, that's going to be a problem. So no lapse of the permit. We're really making it up to the permit owner if you want to pay rental permit fees and all the costs running the business and they're not operating, for so many days. That's a business decision for you to make. So next we have the permitting and operator being responsible for chauffeurs maintenance service quality. This refers to which provisions we're removing that require chauffeurs training, examination, sensitivity training, safety, geographic area where that was a municipal code requirement is being removed, and there's language saying it's up to permittees to ensure that their chauffeurs, people in contract to drive their vehicle, provide the quality of service that they want. So, let's see. And again, this doesn't say, I just want to be clear that the chauffeurs are employees. It's retained as an independent contractor, hired as an employee, whatever employment arrangement there is. It's still a permittee just have service responsibility to ensure the quality of service they want from chauffeurs that drive the vehicles. And so, next I have a bunch of changes to the accessible taxi cabs. I mentioned these earlier. Operating hours deleted. That good cause exception for declining a call for service or a accessible cab. Free permit and no minimum on the number of cabs. That's a big, I think, start burden sending us to start operating at 5 vehicles. So it's not minimum. So next we have changed the taxi cab market conciliation hearing. That hearing is not going to happen in 2021, but we got a request from the industry to add one of the considerations at that hearing is the call volumes, response times, and the impact of additional permits for Cloudy County. And again, the conciliation hearing, the commission has convinced that additional permits would be harmful, and then they can decide new permits issued for the following year.
Dean.
This is different than the. Yes.
So thank you for this. I'm just looking at the time and how much we have to get through. Could we, for the next slides, could we move through a little bit faster? I think my colleagues can read the material, and it's pretty. You've done a really good job here of summarizing. So move a little bit faster through the rest of these, so we can hear from a little bit of testimony from the industry.
I agree. That's important. I'll be faster on this.
Okay, thank you.
So vehicles were making a lot of requirements to TNCs. Any licensed mechanic can inspect the vehicle. Inspections are reduced. I mentioned those earlier. The markings and paintings, we say that there's no coverage requirement for the vehicle, so it does not be the whole vehicle. It just has to be conspicuous markings. Surveillance cameras I mentioned and described earlier, as well as the southern electronic law. There's some changes to taximeters. This is basically there were changes to the national organization that sets the standards for testing and receiving taximeters that accommodated a software-based GPS-based taximeter, just incorporated that language. So making with software-based taximeter. And this is all to modernize.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go back. What is NIST?
That's the National Institute of Standards and Technology. So they had a conference last summer of the National Conference of Weights and Measures, and they proposed amendments to the NIST, and they voted to pass these changes to taximeters code that allow the new type of GPS software-based taximeters.
Is that a good time?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I have background information on that if any of you are interested. Would you next one, please? So a bunch of changes for the chauffeur's license requirements of drivers. There's going to be a physical exam required to get chauffeur's license. All of these are basically to make it similar to becoming a driver for other transportation services. All you need is your state of Alaska driver's license, pass the background check, and pass the English proficiency exam. This is something that's in a nutshell what these changes we need to do. The drug and alcohol testing, there's no pre-license drug alcohol testing screening, so it's only going to be on an accident, citation, or for cause drug and alcohol testing. And that can be done by any alcohol testing, drug alcohol center that's already qualified under the Federal Department of Transportation standards. Instead of the municipality selecting a vendor, so it reduces the administrative burden of the municipality as well as I think on the chauffeurs' permits. Trip sheets being eliminated, and we'll the background checks. We still have fingerprint-based background check, but you also have the option to do a third-party primary source locator and background check, similar to TC background check. Very similar to state law that was passed last year. So to summarize the changes to dispatch services, I hit on a bunch of these already. Basically, dispatch systems, you have two choices. You have a radio dispatch system and a computerized dispatch system. And you can supplement it with an app, digital dispatch app, if you want to. You have to have one of those two. That's what makes a taxi cab, pretty much. Let's see. The operations, I mentioned, I think most of these the ability to show we can provide service throughout the entire municipalities important. Auditing be allowed, and reporting requirements for records reporting to the transportation inspectors. It's reduced from what I think it was before monthly, so it's now twice annually. And I think we might hear from Mr. Restaurant on that particular change, but it's in this draft at this time. We eliminated two data requirements in the dispatch records. One was if a request was from shooting out Guido River or eliminate that, so you don't need to know where it came from. Well, we might have that done. And there was also a requirement to, if the request for a fare waited more than 30 minutes for the dispatch service found web, they find out why they waited so long, what happened, and the resolution, this removes that requirement to report that. Could go on, could be said. And continuing some dispatch service changes. Before there were requirements for the dispatchers to be trained, and we just read that section for dispatch service companies that's how to train dispatchers. There was a section about FCC compliance for the radio dispatching system. We're going to move the FCC enforcement regulations. Let's see. The no dispatch license lapse, the similar to permit lapsing, not permitted in service on for a certain period of time. I think this was 90 continuous days out of service to use the dispatch license. This removes that. With some telephone response requirement, we still hope people answer the phones, but it's not going to be in code. There was its own priority dispatching requirement as well. Let's see. The business bullets here, we have a requirement to disclose the consideration if you started registering dispatch license. You still have to, report transfers before you put out the purchase price. There was a section requiring merger plans, but the way I see it, the merger plans pretty much transferring interest in dispatch license, so that's all covered. Which means that merger plans out subsection. So a couple miscellaneous items that we fit into these categories. We referenced the motor fuel taxes, including the average price for motor fuel, which allows you to add motor fuel surcharge. So just making sure that we're not saying it's a charge motor fuel tax we calculated. Let's see. And then section 7, I already mentioned, having the Transportation Commission report 120 days after the passage of the ordinance. But contrary, we're still maintained without subsection, not section 7. Lisa, I think that I'm ready to turn this back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Dean. So we're at what would have been the end of the committee meeting. My intention is to continue for the next 30 minutes. We're not going to change. We're not going to change the agenda at all, and we're all here. It's publicly noticed. I think it's fine. We were delayed in starting. First, I'd like my colleagues for any questions. This is a lot of material, I know. John, we'll start with you.
Okay, section 7, Transportation Commission shall review. So this is, we would pass this and then they would review and possibly recommend change?
Oh, no, we have the municipal code, we have the municipal code of regulations, and the commission, they adopt those regulations. They still have to be approved by the city, and they have a bunch of them related to efficient testing and certain different operational requirements. So it's just this after we pass this, the commission will get your regulations. They also could, of course, recommend the other changes that they saw to their review after ordinance passed. Perhaps things that need to occur for implementation.
So it's advisory then?
Well, they are a regulatory commission, but we've reduced some of the regulatory ability here. They still pass regulations. So this requires them to look at the regulations, but I'd say that we welcome their advice and then their changes as well if they want.
What page is that? What page of the ordinance is that change on?
Page 47. It's a new section 7.
So if I could get it, so we're basically saying we would pass the ordinance, then they have 4 months to change the regulations to make it happen. So essentially our effective date needs to be 4 months after this would be passed. Is that correct, Eric?
Well, you know,
It would only on those specific provisions that require commission review and adoption.
So a
We
lot.
know what those are. I mean, would it hurt to say effective date is after their review and change the regulation?
I think I'd oppose that because most, or a significant portion, for example, reducing the fees, that doesn't require their approval. So I wanted to just go into effect immediately.
I don't want to stumble on effective immediately, but we're not ready yet.
Yeah.
Would that work, Eric, I suppose?
Their review is not for review and approval, it's just for review.
They make regulations.
That's what I mean.
if I may.
Yes, Mr. Gates.
You may be used to one cities to the Planning and Zoning Commission, just the kind of authority for the Transportation Commission. The Transportation Commission generally reviews the permit applications and approves them. Is that correct, Mr. Mercer? So they're looking at the industrial applications individually, which the assembly doesn't look at. But the assembly passes this code as a general public policy for the taxi cab industry. And the commission can recommend changes to it. They can't change code. The assembly can. Look at the superior authority in that respect, so we can have this effective meeting. Any conflicting regulations that exist now will be superseded by language that's effective immediately. The commission's job is to look at what's in conflict and needs to change, and to try to change it in the regulations and published regulations, so we resolve any inconsistency, at least on the books. Any inconsistency on the books is going to be superseded by what's adopted in code.
But effectively, we do want that commission to look at this before we address it at the assembly. Are they involved now?
No. Yeah, it's not like a Title 21 change where we have to go through planning and zoning.
Not half of we would prefer it. I mean, they deal with it at the nuts and bolts level. What do they think? Maybe something may jump out where they go, can't do that.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had originally, when we tried to set this committee, we wanted a member of the Transportation Commission to sit as a ex officio member, and the recommendation from legal was that we couldn't do it. And I'm trying to remember why that was, Eric.
In the opinion came back that it would subject that person to perhaps some undue influences or pressure, even as an ad hoc member, because the assembly is a separate legislative body, and the commission may or may not agree.
So is
no
there-
help is coming out, so.
Is there a mechanism by which the Transportation Commission could review this and make recommendations to us, or?
Well, at this point, with the way it was done in the past, going back to 2013, was the assembly introduced the ordinance and referred it to the commission to hold hearings and make recommendations back to the assembly.
Okay.
We could do it subject to, I mean, we could approve it subject to their review and approval.
Well, what he just described is, I could introduce it, and then we could refer it to them. I could set the public hearing date out a bit,
Yeah.
and then we could hear from them. But we don't have to. It's not like we don't have to take any of the recommendations.
We'd like to, though. Like to hear from them.
We hear from them. Yeah, we'd like to hear from them, but we don't have to do either way. I mean, if we had, yeah, we didn't send the ordinance. We passed 2 taxi ordinances last year. I don't think we sent either of them to the Transportation Commission, did we?
No, that's correct.
Right.
What kind of delay would that?
That's correct.
Well, typically, and what my suggestion would be, if that was a consideration, there's a report back deadline. A lot of the commissions, it's tough getting commission members too. We have several vacancies right now that need to be filled, and oftentimes folks want a month or so off in the summer. So,
Well, I intend to introduce this relatively soon once we have it, in a reasonably acceptable form. I can set the public hearing date out a little bit further, but I do want it introduced at some point in the near future. So I don't think the summer. I'd like to get this resolved well before the summer. Okay. Okay. Any other questions before we hear from the industry?
I guess
Pete?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering what we're eliminating the need for trip sheets after June 1st, 2020, and why is that?
Well, right now, code requires the chauffeur keeps their trip sheet to retain that record for 2 years. And so this is effective. Didn't want to get rid of your trip sheets that you're holding on to for the past 2 years. Instead, hold on to them for 2 years from now, then get rid of them. And trip sheets that are more than 2 years old, you need to disposed of, but the code currently requires you to keep them. So if you have a trip sheet from last month, after this is passed, and we still need to keep it until, I guess, 2020 December, I just put June 2021 to give some cushion to
But-
attention.
But they won't have to be generating new trip sheets as soon as it's passed. Is that right, Dean?
Correct. It's just for the retaining trip sheets that they have in the
John, you had some other questions?
Yeah, just briefly, how is that accessible cab fleet system we set up working?
the disability fleet permit. That went out after it was adopted by the assembly, and there was Hope Industries we met with, we discussed it somewhat, but after that there was little interest. If I may, through the chair real quick, the biggest difficulty to overcome with the disability cab is that my vehicle for hires and even anchor rides, when they transport medical with most of that businesses, they're paid $38 a trip. But state regulations require my cabbies to be paid the meter rate. And so a vehicle for hire can take 2 blocks and be paid $38. Cabbies are taking 2 blocks and be paid $5. It's really, really difficult to overcome without.
And it's a state law requirement?
It's state regulations, just through the Medicaid. Most of that's all Medicaid business. Life Med was one of the largest operators of private disability transport. They got out of business through a lot of difficulties. So it's out there. We keep trying to market the fleet permits. I think we'd be open to any compromise to someone who wanted to operate a disability cab. to help increase that service, but it's a difficult.
Yes, John?
So there was an English test, we got rid of it, you want to put it back, and just give me, you just have like a vocabulary test or something, what is that? The English?
Yeah, I'm sorry through the chairs, I can't hear you.
What-
What does the English test amount to?
Well, it has long been a requirement that a chauffeur applicant be able to, at a very basic level, read, write, or communicate. So that you could give them directions and they could input those directions. It is controversial. We've gone through the Human Rights Commission, the Equal Rights Commission, and the Ombudsman, and it's down to, it's a very basic series of questions that, we converse with them, to fulfill.
And it's actually administered by your office?
It's administered by us as an application.
And I can speak to that just as a policy matter. So I had originally had that eliminated in the December 6th draft. I had a number of people in industry kind of come up to me and say, you should put this back in. And so I did. Pete?
So if someone fails that test, is there a waiting period before they can try again?
Through the chair, there really isn't, and we have never, typically it's one of the immigrant's family members that are now coming and joining their operation. And if they're unable to, we suggest that they just work out a couple of days and come back. And typically they do. And we will also suggest that they, work with Nine Star, one of the other ESL, community centers to improve the skills. And they actually are really great about it in most cases. They don't do that, so.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if it's all right, is there anyone from the industry that wants to speak to this draft? We really value your input. I know that many of you communicate with me and with Dean, but this is a chance to get things on the record and also let it be heard by my colleagues. So is there anyone that would like to testify? Yes, please. Can you come up to the front, please, so we can catch? Can we get her a chair, or let's see. Chris, would you mind?
Thank you. My name is Kim Baby. I'm the dispatch manager at Alaska Yellow Dispatch. And speaking to the handicap, the disability vehicles, the biggest problem that we have is that the drivers are having to drive clear across town. And like he said, they're just not, and they're only going 2 blocks and they're only making $5 because there's only, at any given time, between 4 and 5, maybe 6 of them on the road at one time. And that's a yellow cab. I know Checker Cab has even less handicap vehicles than we do. And so it's very difficult to get these calls covered. And so if some kind of program or something could be maybe looked at to incentivize these permit owners to, and the drivers to go and get these trips, we could service that community much better. Because when you're driving in 5 o'clock traffic from Spenard all the way out to Muldoon, that's a long way to go for $5. And the cars are expensive, the vehicles to maintain and to just put them on the road costs them between $20,000 and $35,000. And then, so you're looking at that expense.
So
I would.
So Eric, you said that the biggest challenge is the state law. Is there anything that we can potentially do to alleviate this, and is there anything that other cities have done?
Well, what other cities are doing,
Thank you for your testimony, Kim.
Thank you.
we concur. First, I have no sympathy for a disability permit owner that receives a permit to provide service to the community and then refuses to do it. And we would take action against that. But second, it really is about fairness. New York has gone to a 5-county 311 system for disability transportation, but they assess a per trip fee. It's 10 cents of every for-hire transport in that 5-county, or Uber, Lyft, the cabs, and what have you. And we don't have that ability. The way the state bifurcated the regulated vehicle system and what they passed, was atrocious and just detrimental to us as a community, and should be repealed. Absent a repeal, everything that we would try to do could amount to discrimination, or some sort of discrimination, and run us up. Even this 20% adjustment, what's in the ordinances, all the rates have to be non-discriminatory. And if we do that, we're gonna have every cabbie sitting at the Avenue Bar or sitting at the airport, oh, look, here's Sally, 20%. Oh, here's Fred, 20%. And it'll create some issues, so I just.
That's interesting. Well, that what you just described means that perhaps we should make the 20% not applicable to the curbside, because that would eliminate that. But if the dispatch company, whoever was saying, it is New Year's Eve, we're going to surge the whole fleet, that would resolve your concerns about discrimination.
Yeah, well, it would, as long as we're able to universally apply it. Yeah, and the greatness of the technology that we're seeing with both even the dispatch companies and the TNCs is the ability to do that, with notice and what have you, and bring us forward.
Yeah, but that technology discriminates, quote unquote, in the non-pejorative sense, based on time and location, not based on race or gender or whatever.
Well, it is, because the dispatch company is setting the rates at time and distance.
Right,
Through
that's-
either the algorithms or through the.
Right, but what you're worried about is people surging at the Avenue Bar based on something they're seeing. If you are downtown and there's a really high demand for calls for Uber or Lyft or taxis, I think the 20% is not discriminatory in the sense that the Human Rights Commission needs to be worried about it. Right, that's just a business raising their prices based on demand.
Well, I think it would be a problem if it's not universally applied.
Yeah.
The right solution to that would be through the regulations authorized like Thursday, Friday, and Saturday from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m., 10% surcharge. Because as long as there's meters, it would have to be an attribute. If it's not controlled in the base rate of time and distance, it would have to be an attribute. So because it's required to be posted on the vehicles, within that time period, it could be assessed across the board. But to be able to just do it at any time without some uniformity would be a problem.
Okay. Well, let's talk with Dean more about this offline. Is there other testimony that we could get from people in the industry, or?
I'm going to speak to that.
Sure, Dave.
Mike Thompson.
Could you identify yourself for the record?
I'm Michael Thompson,
Michael Thompson, sorry.
owner of Turner County. I can't price serve one car. I mean, it'd have to be the whole fleet. And as far as a specific time, I don't think the time is what would be, leave it up to me as a dispatcher. If I have enough calls, then I surge. If I don't surge. I mean, we're kind of trying to simplify this a little bit, and then instead of putting the time, okay, this time you can, leave it up to me. I'm not going to, raise rates if it's slow and elegant. It's not to my advantage. So the best way to do it is let this mess figure it out on its own. Or you can say if call counts, and that's even hard to do too, if it goes up 20%. But the best way to do it, just say, dispatch, you decide on it. If I do it and people don't want to pay, they're going to call me, or they're going to call Uber, they're going to call somebody else.
What's that?
That seems like a marketing thing to me,
Sure.
free market, if they don't want to pay that price, then they call someone else.
And I guess it's interesting. So you guys would surge across your fleet. So individual cabs wouldn't be able to hit this surcharge. It
I
has
would
to be
have
across
go
the fleet.
Change
Right.
the system, or actually I would have to call UPS, like the company I'm using, and tell them to change on the rates, because it's,
Because rates are set at the dispatch level, not at the cab level.
right.
Right. Okay. I think that actually makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you, Michael. Yes.
If I could,
Oh, John, Mike, can you come back? John has a question, and then, sir, we'll get to you.
So when we had an issue here, we don't want anything to be discriminatory based on race or sex or whatever it might be. But so could that happen? If you're in an office in Midtown and you just see a lot of calls coming in, I'm charging more now. Would there be any kind of way to be discriminatory based on race or sex or any protected category? Would you even know?
I wouldn't have a clue. When people call them, ask what color or who You know, so, I can't say only these 4 cabs can surge, or I can't say only the cabs downtown can surge. I can say all of them or none of them.
That's interesting, and that's different than Uber and Lyft, because they can do that. They can surge just in one neighborhood.
They can do anything they want. They are unregulated, unaccountable, and not
Well,
part of this economic.
But I'm talking about the technology. If you were using a sophisticated app, then maybe you would get to the point where you could surge one part of your fleet, not others. But to me, that I am not as opposed to that as some others. I mean, if there's really high call volume in one neighborhood or one area, that's again, it's sort of the fact that it's like we have $7 subs at Subway here, and when it was supposed to be $5 footlongs everywhere else. Like you just sometimes you have different prices in different places.
Actually, you would be describing a little discrimination if you do it by neighborhoods. Because, let's say I get more calls from
Right.
than us, so much from south, I'm gonna charge more than the south. So it's all,
Yeah.
and don't tell me what, just whenever I want to.
Okay. Well. All right. Good. Next.
Good afternoon, I'm Bob Ransom, I'm a driver and an operator. I would just like to say that some of these changes, you should be careful that it doesn't compromise the safety of the public, because a lot of this stuff is for that reason. And when I have customers in the cab, I bring that point up that we have DOT physicals, we're drug tested, and we have training. Now, my wife has a contract for the school, and I think that is an asset, because in any industry, there's an orientation. If you want to go work on the slope, you have to go to a class. You just don't go up on the slope anymore.
Does the government run the slope class or the industry?
I think the industry.
So why wouldn't this industry, if they want to maintain quality, do these kind of tests?
Excuse me?
So we are doing this for you now. You know, we are doing these, or well, we're requiring you to. But if you want to maintain quality, why wouldn't you require your drivers to get physicals, or you require your drivers to get drug tested?
Well, who's to say that they would do it properly, or even do it at all? Who would be in charge of the continuity of that? If, you know, it's upon that person, and you know, I mean, it is a safety thing that you come into the industry that you learn something about it. And there's going to be a lot of new drivers coming into the industry with these new permits that are being added. So I mean, and some of the other regulations that you want to get rid of, you know, the drug testing and all. I don't want somebody driving my family around that hasn't been drug tested. That's why I tell them don't use Uber.
Okay. John, you had a question?
You know, I mean, I agree with that a lot. I mean, you don't want to dilute your brand. I mean, guys like me, I know Uber is not out there. I call it. For whatever reason, wherever I am, I assume that there's some higher standard. And I may be wrong, but I have that identity with the brand.
Right.
You know, so you wouldn't want to dilute it, but there are other ways to get there too. You get the good housekeeping seal. I don't know if they do that anymore, but within your industry, run with that and say you have the Anchorage taxi cab industry seal or something like that. So you do it, you control it, and guys like me look for that. You know,
We've been a
everyone
business
has that.
bureau,
But you get to choose the criteria, not enough.
But I just like to say that any rules that you change that may affect the safety of the public is very important. You should take that into account.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Bob. Kim?
I'd like to follow up a little bit on what Bob was talking about. And you say, why can't the industry do it? Well, the cab companies could do it if they were our employees. That's the difference between a sloper and a cab driver. They're their own person, they're their own business. You know, they drive a yellow cab, which that owner of that car subscribes to our dispatch service. But I can't say you as a driver have to go get a drug test and take this class, or you can't work here, because they're not my employees. I can do that for my dispatch personnel, but I can't do it for a cab driver because they're independent contractors.
Can you refuse to take an independent contractor if they refuse to do training or take drug tests?
But so in that scenario, who would be paying for the drug test? They would say, well, if you're requiring me to get a drug test to work to drive a yellow cab, then you gotta pay for it.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Right now, so I want to lower I want to lower the permit holder's fees, for example. That requires me to lower the burden on the transportation inspector. So that is a shifting of some costs, there's no question. And it's going to impact the negotiations you have. But if I put more work on the transportation inspector, I'm going to have to raise your fees again.
I mean, it's not that it's not doable, it's just where does the contractor's costs come in, and where do the company's costs come in, or the permit holder's costs come in?
Sure. But I mean,
Yeah.
I guess what my overall kind of, what we're trying to do here is allow those things to be resolved within the industry between you guys, based on the free market negotiations, rather than having government impose it on you. That's what I'm trying to do. Yes, Dean.
In fact,
Thank you for your testimony, though, Kim. I
I
appreciate it.
just want to clarify that drug and alcohol testing
Yeah.
and how it's changing. That's on page 6 of ordinance draft. So currently we have, before a chauffeur can get a chauffeur's license, a screening test. That's what's being removed, not the other test. That wasn't an application of permittees or dispatch services to require. That's an application. The municipality required that as an applicant for a license. That's removed. But we still have, and similar to a low tolerance policy, if there's some cost, we someone's under the influence, a test can be required. Municipality, transportation inspector, maybe, or there's an accident or a citation. Drug and alcohol test is still required, so those are still in place. And plus, we have language that says those tests for cause or accident or citation tests, the cost is borne by the permittees. And the difference though is the permittee doesn't have to go to the municipality, select the drug alcohol testing vendor, the fee structure and all that. Instead, you can look around, and there's a few places in town, came in some others, worksite, that are, I think, if I got them right, qualified under federal DOT standards to provide drug alcohol testing, and shop around for which one to go, what prices you want, and send them to the bill.
Thank you, Dean. Yeah, so to be clear, what he said is not all testing requirements are being eliminated, just some of the early ones, right? Yeah, okay. Did you have something you want to say, sir?
Yes, I do. My name's Bruce Horton.
Bruce Horton.
Although I am not invested as an owner, permanent owner anymore in the industry, I have been in and out of it longer than probably anyone in this room. I did own the mini mover frame operation 30 years ago in the Eagle River Chudiak area, which was another bureaucratic failure of the municipality. But all of this is great, and it's great to see bureaucrats justifying their salaries and all this. You know, it would be very applicable, except for the fact that you have unregulated gypsy cabs swarming all over this city. You have them taking fares, taking flags with their own little special top lights that say Uber or Lyft. Right out there, 6th and F, they sit there at night, right over here in front of Willy Wong 2 weekends ago. You know, the softwares of both Uber and Lyft have been hacked. It took Uber a year to admit it. They have a series of crimes. If you want to Google Grayball software, which is their spyware that they're using, and they use on every municipality they have ever entered, I don't believe this is an exception. Okay? If you look at their list of crimes that they've covered up, rapes, everything else, bring the Gambinos in because they haven't shot anybody on your block. Okay? Right out there, 2 weekends ago, a young lady in front of Willy Wong on a Saturday night. I happened to be there in a cab operating it. A black van pulled up with no windows and 2 guys in it. She talked to them, ran over, got in my cab. Okay? She had called Lyft. These guys showed up, said they were her Lyft ride. Okay? We headed out towards Sand Lake. Halfway out, she got a call from the actual Lyft driver because somebody was hacking that software, which there's no accountability, no control. People accept this stuff like a baby with a shiny object that puts it in its mouth without any understanding whatsoever of the artificial intelligence system they're dealing with, which is in another place, which has no accountability here, which is covering up already. There are liquor deliveries, there's drug dealing going on with Uber and Lyft, there is no cameras, there is no regulation. You have you're totally impotent, okay, and allowing the state, and since Uber has bribed people all over the world, I am not putting it past someone in the state government to have their palm greased to allow these guys in here. This is the reality of it. Fiddling while Rome burns is what I call this. Because in reality, out there on the street, at night, at day, there is this wide open door for criminal activity. There is no regulation. You have no idea what is going on whatsoever. And that is going to be the reality until people gird up their loins and stand up and say, this cannot happen here. And the municipality of Anchorage needs to stand up and tell the state that. If Jerry Prevost could get the bars to close early in 1984 in the liquor stores, then this municipality has at least the cojones to try and make things work. Because that's what's going on. There are immigrant families of other ethnicities and colors that have invested their entire life savings in the taxi industry that are being destroyed right now. They're not organized yet. But I'd be glad to give them a hand. I have a series, I have novels published, I'm a writer. And I'd be glad to give those people a voice.
Okay.
And bring this to a fair.
Thank you, Mr. Orton. Appreciate your testimony. So, yeah, I mean, as you probably know, that we passed the regulatory framework last year, and it got overturned by the state.
Then stand up.
Raphael, do you have some?
Yes, I want to say,
I'm sorry, could you identify yourself for the record?
Rafael Barbosa. I just would like to say that, we as an industry, with all this extra competition and the ordinance that got passed last year, we're hurting. And I don't hear this body of government, I never get to hear from you guys that we are going to review this ordinance. It needs to be reviewed. Just throwing this many permits out there is hurting us. The cats are sitting. Nobody's talking about that. There's a lot of cats that are sitting. And, we can't wait till 2021 when there's already visible problem. I would like to get somebody to stand up at this time.
John, you have a question?
So just to clarify then, so your main concern is the number of permits more than the rules?
The new permits have been, I'm sorry, ask me that question one more time.
So, we're looking at changing the rules, but you're not so worried about the rules. You're more worried that there's just too many permits. That's the main issue.
We got Uber and Lyft here. So this ordinance is supposed to be reviewed when in 2021. We're going to be waiting too long. Something needs to be done about it. All these things that are being talked about are the list of our problems right now. Plain and simple.
All right. Well, we've reached 12:30. Do you have something you want to see?
Can I tag on to that real quick?
Sure.
My name is Susie Smith, and I'm an operator in the industry. I just want to follow up with what Raphael's saying, because although I think a lot of this is a good attempt to make a little bit less burdens for us operators, the fact is what's really happening in our industry. In August, I got dispatch call volumes presented, and the call volumes were down 25% from when Uber and Lyft came into play till August, so for the summer months. I don't know what it is today. I don't have current dispatch records because it's very difficult to get from one company. The other company is very generous with giving them. Anyways, but I can only assume that it's lower yet. And I'm saying this based on my fleet operation that I lease out. I'm way down on drivers. Last month I was prepared to speak, and my loss shifts, sitting shifts with like 19% vacancy, so I have 19% of my fleet just sitting there. I don't have drivers to fill them. That was before any of these additional permits have been added in the ones that were just auctioned. Today I did it, it's 20%, 26% vacancy I'm down. Within a month, okay? So permit leases, when we started this back in May, with Uber and Lyft coming, with new permits coming around, permit leases were going for around $1,300 a month. I would guess that you could verify that as a transportation officer. I think the average now is, if you're lucky, $500 a month. My lease rates that I lease my drivers to, I'm down 50% on my light shifts, almost 50%. I had to reduce them just to keep some sort of drivers on board and competitive, and my day shifts are probably at 30% down. So, I mean, we're making major cuts. You know what the only place that isn't making a cut? Dispatch. When you guys, not you guys, I'm not saying that, when the assembly passed the ordinance to add 20 more permits this year, 20 more permits next year, 20 more permits the year after that, the dispatch companies gained 20 more memberships, okay? But they haven't reduced their rates, nor do they have any intention of it. Our industry is in a really bad shape. I hate to tell you, but my family's been in this business 40 years, and it's literally whatever I can do to make it right now, and we'll see how it goes in 3 months. I mean, I don't know where I'm gonna be, but these are great. It's like that. It's like, wow, we're talking about, okay, you don't have to get our industry is hurting badly. And yeah, I think number one thing on this needs to be reevaluating how we're adding permits to our system. There is no business in this world that would add more shops to something or comic shops downtown if the business wasn't there. And we're just flooding more down our throats, and we don't have the business to utilize it. That's it.
Yeah, John?
Okay, so there's a couple of questions. So people aren't leasing your permits because they're buying their own? Is that what's going on? Or are people just not entering the taxi cabin?
The prices have reduced dramatically because there aren't drivers filling those shifts, which is reflected in all those upper, prices. Your overhead had to come down. So for a permit operator right now, I lease permits. I own some, but I also lease them. They're $500. Well, I don't pay myself anything for one thing. I'm not getting a single permit fee for myself. But permit fees that I operate, yeah, I've had them reduced from like $1,400, some of them, $1,400 in May they were getting. They're down to $500 now.
But so you can't get enough drivers to use your permit. So is that because
the drivers can't make a living.
Because they're going to drive TNCs, or they're just not entering the taxi?
Actually, I don't think it's mostly TNC operations.
But
They're
It's
literally
the
leaving the business because they cannot make it. I created a list back in August of how many drivers I lost and where they went, because some took other jobs because they couldn't make it. There's all sorts of things, but most of them truly left because they were not making enough money to live on and not going to drive TNC. Because I can tell you, TNC drivers, maybe you can attest to this, but they're not really making it either, because the pool is only so big. We lost 25 or 30% in August when I calculated of ride volume, call volumes, probably due to Uber and Lyft. But then you also add now more taxis on top of it. I don't know about you guys, but I don't take Uber and Lyft or a taxi any more often than I did last year or I do now, because there's more available. I just don't. I take them when I need it, and that's it.
So can I follow up with Eric then? If in fact people can't make money driving a cab, so they're not entering the industry, are you selling more permits? You would sell less permits if that were the case.
Well, through the truth, that hasn't been tested as yet. With the latest permit offering that concluded here, the 1st of December, of the available permits, of the non-dispatchables were all let. The average price paid was about $11,000. And so, and every one of those were chauffeurs that had been leasing vehicles previously. And so, have done it, that have had the opportunity to acquire one.
Okay, so if I get the dynamic then, so people who may have leased yours are now buying their own, and then they go to a dispatcher and cut their deal, so you're out of the loop. Right, so that leaves you hanging. with the-
True. There are some drivers I lost that bought their own permits, yes.
But just a few, not a lot, because we saw that coming.
No, I lost 5. The initial auction you guys had in May, June, I lost 5 drivers. 5 of my drivers bought those permits.
And that was expected when we passed it.
Mhm.
We expected that to happen.
Right. I expected it too.
All right.
So guys, I'm sorry, we are way over time. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll have another Transportation Committee meeting sometime soon. Look forward to that.